Hi everyone, welcome to Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And a happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. I know we didn't get a chance to visit on Father's Day, which is, as of this filming, was yesterday. So I'm really pleased that you got to have a Father's Day if you were a father. I hope you got everything your heart desired. Steak and cookies. Excuse me. So, moving right along. So Lucifer is a fairly, as far as symbols go, he's a really interesting symbol, which is why I want to talk about him. Because I am a symbologist. I love symbology. I love esoteric philosophy, which is why I do what I do. I wouldn't have joined a mystery school if I didn't have a pretty keen interest in this stuff. But Lucifer is a fairly enigmatic figure, right? I mean, he's been evoked by the Pope during a Christmas mass. Satan has been called Lucifer. The only thing anyone ever remembers about Albert Pike, this guy, this is like a 900-page book. This is like a 900-page book, right? And the only thing people know about this book, for the detriment of all, is that once there's one quote taken out of context that says, and I quote, Freemasonry is and has always been Luciferian, end quote. And so that's the one thing people pick out of this entire thing. And he's like, Albert Pike it proves that the Masons are evil because they worship the devil. And so we're going to break down the symbol today. And I think it'll do good things for everybody. The thing to keep in mind as we go through this, the first point I want to make is that my goal is I'm not seeking to prove that Lucifer is a good guy, and I'm not seeking to prove that he's a bad guy. All right, this is not what this is about. All right. Secondly, as I always say, I have no expectation of belief. I do not need you to believe me. All right, I'm just going to all we're going to do is just break down the symbol. And the third thing to keep in mind, and this is where the controversy comes in a little bit, and we'll get into some much, much more controversial subjects a little bit later on. Which is the point I want to make is that people fear what they don't understand. And people won't research what they fear. And so what you're left with is a lot of really bad fear-based information. All right. I'm going to level with you. I'm not super comfortable with the symbol of Lucifer either. I did come from, I did grow up Christian, and so there's still a part of me that's still a little iffy about it. But I also know enough to know that simply letting your emotion dictate what you believe in isn't necessarily a good idea. So so as we go forward, I just need you to erase everything you think you know, pretend you know nothing at all, and just start from scratch. And so I could teach you what the symbol actually means and how it is actually used, because it appears in a lot of weird places. And if you didn't know better, it would really be really confusing, because if Lucifer was literally the devil, as they say that Albert Pike, as they say, then why is Albert Pike using it? And why a devout Christian? Albert Pike was a devout Christian, so why is he using it? And why is the Pope using it during a Christmas mass? Right? So it's appearing in weird places. So, but once you understand the esoteric nature of the symbol, it'll make a lot more sense than it just being Lucifer is the devil. Okay. I'm trying to cut back on my coffee and drink actual water for a change. I miss my coffee. I'm probably going to go make some after this. Okay. So, the thing to remember, like I always say, is that all esoteric symbology is based on three things. It's always triform in nature. It's a physical thing you can point to in the literal universe, like in the world. You can point to it outside and say, there it is. That is what the symbol is. There's a mental component that represents something, a function of your mind, and it represents a spiritual function as well. Spirit, mind, or physical body, or external body, mind, and spirit. All right, three things. Man is three. We live in a 3D universe. Symbols represent three things. 3, 3, 3. All right, make 6. So, the way, how do I put this? Okay. Exoteric. The word exoteric is the word we get exterior from, an exoskeleton. Exoteric essentially means knowledge that is exterior from. In occult circles and esoteric philosophy and in mystery school philosophy, exoteric typically means the knowledge that is outside the gates of the temple. Hang on, I forgot to put this on airplane mode. I don't want it to go off and then interrupt us. So, exoteric means the information that exists outside the temple. So, and in esoteric philosophy, all things are positioned, all symbols are positioned as though you're standing inside the temple. So, the mainstream religions, mainstream science, the things that's told to the masses is considered exoteric information, is exoteric knowledge. And the things that exoteric knowledge does is usually what is given to people, what's given to the masses in aggregate, is a list of do's and don'ts, like some sort of lists of 10 commandments, some sort of list of 10 commandments, something like that. And in addition to that, they're genuinely told to believe in the mythology as a literal history. Okay, that's typically what happens. If you realize this, if you realize what we're talking about here, we're talking about the first of the 3 parts of the symbol. Right? Symbols come in 3 parts: physical, mental, spiritual. Really what most mainstream religion deals with is the external exoteric knowledge. This is stuff that is in the literal world. You know, it's the part of Jesus that literally existed. It's the part of Odin that literally existed. There's a literal world tree. There's a literal Yggdrasil. There's a literal Hugin and Munin. Right? There's a literal Antichrist. There's a literal Satan who sits on a literal throne who wants to, that's the way that the symbols tend to work. But the esoteric knowledge, the stuff that's on the inside of the 3. So you think of knowledge like a pyramid, like a triangle. 1, 2, 3. The esoteric stuff encompasses not only the exoteric stuff, but also the other 2 parts of the symbol. So when we're dealing with things like Lucifer, for example, it's not just Lucifer as a literal person, as like the For instance, Lucifer was a king of Babylon, right? And then people also believe Lucifer as like the devil, like the fallen angel, part of him, the literal external thing. But he also represents mental phenomena and spiritual phenomena. And those are the primary things we're going to get into today. I'm going to briefly touch on the external thing, just because everyone has heard it 1,000 billion times, and it's really not necessary to go into that in a whole lot of depth. But then after that, we're going to go into the other two in a lot more detail. Sound good? Okay. So, Lucifer, the literal guy. The first known instance of Lucifer comes from the Bible, and what it refers to is a Babylonian king who he was a particularly aggressive guy, and he conquered a lot of land and acquired a lot of power for himself. But either through divine intervention or bad luck or fate, he goes crazy. He goes literally crazy and ends up out in the fields eating grass with the wild beasts. His hair grows, he can't talk, he just growls and grunts at everybody. And so people from all over the world would come and look at him in the field and like, this is the guy? Lucifer? This is the guy who brought the world to its knees? Oh, how the mighty have fallen. This is the man who fell from heaven, and a third of his angels had fallen with him. It's this symbol. So right off the bat, we see the symbol of the falling, right? The coming from a place that's on high and the falling to the ground. In Greek and earlier, from the time of Greece and even before that, the idea of tragedy isn't really what we think of it today. Tragedy for the Greeks was literally someone who was at a high station in life, and because of misluck or whatever, fate, they fall to a lower station. That was called a tragedy. From a high station to a low station. Lucifer falls from a high station, kingship, which is said kingship is lowered from heaven. The idea of kingship was lowered from heaven. So, again, we see that thing of from falling. Kingship falls from heaven. Lucifer, the king, falls from the land of authority, kingship, heaven, and falls to the place of the beasts, the underworld. The place where people don't think, the people don't reason. They just grunt and groan and eat grass like the beasts do. Right? And so right away we kind of begin to see the beginnings of what this symbol will ultimately represent. And then, even though there isn't any particular evidence for this, the other externalized version of Lucifer is, of course, the devil. People see Lucifer and then they think he fell from heaven, brought with him his angels, and therefore Lucifer is the devil. And I understand this position will be a little bit controversial for folks. I get that. And the argument always is that you're being tricked. The devil just wants you to think that he's going after, he wants you to think he's an angel of light, but really he's trying to trick you in the darkness. I want to stress that there's a bigger story going on here. And I'm not trying to convince you away from that belief, and that's fine if you believe that. I want to explain that there's something a little bit more going on here. And now we get to go into the esoteric side of things, which I find far more interesting. Like I said, I'm a symbologist. I study esoteric philosophy. I'm a part of a mystery school myself. And so this is stuff that I just really enjoy, even if it's just an academic pursuit. For some people, it's the nuance is really a lot of fun for me. So, the esoteric stuff is the stuff that is it's called hidden knowledge. It's the stuff that's hidden from view. It's esoteric. It's not outside, it's inside. It comes from, I think it's the Greek word esoterikos. I'm a little fuzzy on my language, but I think it comes from esoterikos. It just means the inside knowledge, the hidden knowledge, the knowledge that's held by the few and only the few. And though I don't need you to believe me in this, I hope you understand that what we're going to cover today will put you folks in a very unique position as being one of the very few people who understand the nuance of the symbol. Most people will never hear what you're about to hear today. So, whether you know it or not, you're very lucky. There's probably only 10,000 people or less in the US that know what you're about to know. So, the word Lucifer exoterically symbolizes luz means light. That's where we get the word luminous from. Lu, light. There's a new TV show coming out about a guy named Luce. And fairy exoterically means bringer, light bringer, right? Which is why they always say Lucifer's an angel of light. He's the deceiver. He's the king of lies. He's the false light, that sort of thing. But there's an alternate translation to that, which makes the symbol far more intriguing. Luz, as I said, means light. But fairy is like the word ferrous. How many people know what a ferrous metal is? Raise your hand. Anyone? Any welders, chemists, teachers, science teachers in the room? Ferrous, a ferrous metal is metal that contains that is magnetic. A ferrous metal is a magnetic metal. So Lucifer is literally translates to light metal, luminous metal, or magnetic, or you could say magnetic light. It translates to magnetic light. I grew up in the shadow of my grandfather. He was this old Irish guy, and his dad migrated from Ireland when he was pretty young, and so he grew up. He was those classic old Irish dudes. He was a cowboy and a logger, and he was like, man. But I grew up listening to a lot of Irish stories, a lot of Irish folk tales from him. And one of the things that's really interesting about Ireland is that if you want to get rid of the fairies, you present them with iron. Iron was considered to be very lucky, and if you were a blacksmith, you were considered lucky. You're very well positioned in life, and everyone wanted to be a part of you. You got all the girls if you're a blacksmith. Because of the properties of the metal kept the fairies away. Interesting, right? There's all these stories about having... if you have fairies in your well, you throw bits of iron down the well and it'll get rid of the fairies. If fairies come to your door, you put a horseshoe above the door or a strip of metal, and it keeps the bad spirits away. Why? Why is this? Why are you trying to keep the fairies away with iron? Well, it has to do with the properties of the metal. So one of the things that's known, and that I think science is kind of catching up to, magnetism, sound, vibration, and light are all the same thing. ultimately mathematics, well, ultimately everything is all the same thing. But for our purposes, those four things are all the same thing. They're just measured differently because they're in different vibratory places. So it's different. So your heart is an electromagnet. It creates a magnetic field. And it creates a strong enough magnetic field that there's actually special cameras that will pick up on it, or at least be able to measure it. You can measure someone's electromagnetic field that the heart produces. Your blood is made of iron. There's an iron oxide that exists in your blood, which is why it makes it the red color that it does. Metal, ultimately, is crystallized light. Ferrous metal is crystallized light. It's light that vibrates so fast, and then slowly as it falls to the underworld, it starts to slow down and then crystallize into matter. And then you have crystallized light. You have ferrous metal. Metal that transmits electricity, that will stick to each other. It holds a magnetic, could hold a magnet. And this is really rather interesting. So you have Lucifer, a magnetic light that falls from heaven and lands in the underworld, and then gets stuck in the underworld. And the hold on for a second. So you have Lucifer. He falls from heaven into the underworld, into our world, and he gets interred here. He falls from heaven. And so we see in this story of Lucifer, the Lucifere, the magnetic light, the same story we see repeated over and over and over and over and over again in the mysteries. Basically the god who falls, either for one reason or another, falls into the underworld and then has to escape again. Has to escape and come back out of the underworld. The interment of the spirit. So, and I know what I'm about to say is going to be considered heresy. I know it's going to piss people off. And I understand where you're coming from, and I get it. With that said, it needs to be said. Ultimately speaking, the story of Lucifer is the story of you. The story of Lucifer is the story of you. A magnetic light. A light that falls from the heavens and gets crystallized into an internment, into flesh and blood. Jesus says, "Eat my flesh and drink my blood," right? It's all over the place. The Bible talks about life being in the blood. The life-giving force is in the blood. The electricity that keeps the magnet going is in the blood. Is in the internment, right? It's in the pot. We're called clay for a reason. A mixture of earth and water. It's the admixture of dirt and metals and water. Water and metal is a tremendously effective electricity conductor, which is what your body is made out of. It's made out of metal, and it's made out of water and a little bit of earth. You're a magnet for all of our even though that we're organic in nature, right? We're organic beings. We are entirely electronic. We're electronic. And this is kind of where spirit meets science. Where Yeah, something that was vibrating very fast that falls into internment and slows way, 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 way down to the point where it's now crystallized. It can't escape anymore. And that is what Lucifer means. So the thing to keep in mind is that Lucifer, to the mystery schools, is not necessarily referring to a person, but is representing a function of nature. I'm going to say that again, because that's really important, because this is the crux of the whole video. In the mystery schools, Lucifer, Lucifere, magnetic light, is not necessarily referring to an individual person, but a function of nature. Which is why the devil is called Lucifer. Which is why the Pope, during his Christmas Mass, I forget what they're called, Mass, talked to God and called him Lucifer. So Albert Pike, right here, my man Albert Pike, said that the Masons are Luciferian, which is why the sun outside is called Lucifer. It's all based on the same principle, falling from a higher state into a lower state. A light being coming from brightness takes its light and comes into darkness. All right? The torchbearer comes from the place of brightness into the place of darkness. So if it doesn't necessarily mean if you're a goodie or a baddie. If you're a good person, a good spirit, you could still be a Lucifer. And if you're a bad spirit, you could still be Lucifer. Both are true at once. So the light bringer just simply means he comes from a place of brightness, and then he falls into the underworld, and he brings that light with them, even if that light happens to be interred. Right? And again, I understand that this is controversial stuff. I get it. Believe me, I get it. I grew up Christian. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not super comfortable with the symbol. But that's what Luciferians typically believe. That is the workings of that particular symbol. Is the magnetic light. Is the or metallic light. You have a person, a spirit who comes from light, falls to the underworld, and brings that light with them. All right. And I apologize because I recognize this is so beyond the pale. I recognize that this is something that is kind of hard to hear for some people. I know that Christians have a hard time with it. I get that. A lot of non-Christians have a hard time with it, and I get it. The words like this have been so misused for so long that there's a lot of symbols like that have been so misused for so long, and there's so much misinformation about them, probably on purpose, that people are afraid of them. They're afraid that if they even think about it, they're pondering the devil, and the devil's going to come in. And I get that fear, and I understand it. And I'm not trying to get you to believe in it. I'm not trying to convince you that you're wrong. I'm just trying to, like I said at the beginning, I'm simply trying to do my best to give you the knowledge of the symbol. simply trying to give you the knowledge of the symbol. And that's all I'm trying to do. Now, you could take what you know and you could go and put it in your own life and make your own decisions about it. And I want you to be educated. I don't want you to be afraid of something and so never research something and always be ignorant of it. Right? I don't want you to be ignorant of this stuff. This stuff is important because it's being used a lot in weird ways, and you need to know what is being referred to. So, is Lucifer good or evil? I don't know. I'll let you decide. My personal belief is that it's just a symbol, like any other. Right? I am a little iffy. I don't like using it just because of my Christian background. Like for me, like a lot of people, it carries a lot of baggage. But, on an intellectual level, if I'm actually honest, it's just another symbol. And that when I read Albert Pike and I hear him describe Masonry as Luciferian, I understand where he's coming from. I understand what he's coming from. And so just understanding some of these terms and what the symbols actually mean and are representing will go a long way to helping you actually understand the motives of some of these groups. Okay? Well, I hope I didn't piss you all off. I hope you stick around. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. All right. I love you, folks. Have a good day and stay safe out there, all right? All right. Bye-bye.